Right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody in the room and online to our second AI series on generative AI, social implications. Today we are looking at generative AI in the university. Now, I'm sure you agree with me that 2023 was a red letter year in the history of AI, thanks in particular to ChatGPT, that is still getting a lot of coverage. And in our faculty in particular, it's been quite a contentious issue. We've actually had 3 meetings, I think this was the last two years, focusing particularly on undergraduate issues relating to assessment and AI. So we put the seminar together, I will be done. Put the seminar together to try and sort of look into the issue of AI at the university. The university in the general sense, but Stellenbosch University in particular. And I'd like to introduce the 3 speakers that are going to constitute our, what I call the cross-faculty discussion, cross-faculty roundtable. First up, we have Willem Fourie, who's Chair of Policy Innovation at the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking, and he also leads the Policy Innovation Hub. His research focuses on human factors that support direct and that support direct and limit the use of technology to improve policy making in South Africa. Then we will have Bill Tucker, who is in the Computer Science Department and whose research explores community-based co-design of the technologies designed and built with and for and by vulnerable and marginalized communities. Last but not least, we have our own Tanya de Villiers-Botha, who's in the Department of Philosophy, and is head of the Unit for Ethics of Technology of the Center for Applied Ethics. And her research focuses on the philosophy of cognitive science, philosophy of mind, applied ethics, and increasingly AI. Right, so with no further ado, let me call up Willem. I need to get your PowerPoint running, Willem. Yeah.
Don't get excited, it's not a very fancy presentation. Yeah, it's... Yeah. Look, everybody, I'm Willem. I think the intention was just a shortish type of introduction type of thing. Yeah. So I'm very privileged to be here with Bill and Tanya. Almost certainly, Tanya, you'll reflect on the ethical components. Almost certainly, Bill, I think also on the more technical components. So I thought I'll bring a little small little case study as illustration of the benefits and the limits, I would say, of generative AI within a university context. I'll start with some PR. Okay, no, it's just what we do at the Policy Innovation Lab, which is it's an open innovation introduction or invitation. So it's been a long day for anybody who wants to work with us. So I work at the Policy Innovation Lab at the Data Science School. The School for Data Science and Computational Thinking is a multi/interdisciplinary/transdisciplinary setup where we bring together different disciplines reflecting on the societal industry impact of data science and AI tools and approaches. So yeah, as I've said, in the Data Science School, in the Policy Innovation Lab, we look specifically at the deployment of AI and data science to strengthen policy making in South Africa. So they're very strong sort of tools focus, a really strong policy angle, and we do 3 things essentially. One, we look at the institutional readiness of the policy advisory system in government to use these tools. We work with the presidency, with the policy unit in the presidency, so they oversee the policy advisory system in the country. So help them we do it together, actually understand how the system can be improved essentially. Then that second one is basically training, and the third one is developing and prototyping some tools. We've developed a couple of tools. Created a nice little framework for digital transformation in the public sector. There's a briefing note on our website. There's a catalog of AI tools, a couple of 100 tools deployed that could be available in South Africa. Many other things. That little thing next to the computer is the website, also just policyiinnovationlab.ac.za. Anyway, so that's the PR. Anyway, so working definitions. When we talk about AI, at least when I'm going to talk about AI in my really short thing, it's the technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. I think the keyword, from my perspective, the notion of simulation. There's a question there. I mean, if we build it on human intelligence, I don't think there's clarity on a definition, even what constitutes human intelligence. It's really a overarching definition standing on not the strongest of legs. Then most of you know this, but just to recap, there's the narrow AI trained and focused to perform specific tasks. That's the thing we often talk about. And then the strong AI, which is merely, not barely even a theoretical possibility, all the things that Elon Musk and those guys talk about. That's really not what we're talking about today. Still only maybe perhaps theoretical possibility. All these words are thrown around. This is sometimes a useful graphic to understand the intersection of data science, AI, where machine learning, deep learning, analytics, big data fits in. These terms sometimes are used interchangeably. As you can see, they're not synonyms. Within the broader AI things, of course, this notion of natural language processing, which I'll be looking at, which drives much of the large language models, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, which maybe gives you an answer. One of the ways of conceptualizing is that NLP sits in this intersection. Not the prettiest picture in the world, not the most accurate, but it gives you the sense of the intersection, at the intersection of which fields NLP sits. Now, as I said, I'm going to just share one little story that we experimented with at the Policy Innovation Lab, illustrating the benefits, but I would also say the limitations of the large language models. We had a task where we analyzed the manifestos in the run-up to the election of the 4 largest political parties. What made the manifesto interesting is that they differed radically in style, in length, and in structure. So even though they had the same name, it's just different types of documents. EFF, 260 odd pages, wish list of 260 odd pages, compared to ANC, a much shorter document. So even for human beings, it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to compare these manifestos. What we wanted to do is, first of all, identify cross-cutting topics that are addressed in all 4 manifestos, and then determining the level of convergence and divergence. So is it possible to say that on these identified topics, some of these parties seem to agree and some that they agree less? So convergence, divergence, and then in many places, the notion of that you really can't say. So on a topic like education, we found that they say a lot of things, they talk about different things. It's difficult to say whether they converge or diverge. Anyway, that's a human thing we did. And then we identified a bunch of topic clusters with topics and the level to which they converge or diverge. So on governance, as you would expect from manifestos, a bunch of things, economy, on health, education, energy, safety and security, equity, water, the list goes on. So altogether, 11 topic clusters and 45 topics. That's what the human beings, I don't want to use the word experts, but people who know their way around public policy type of things identified. Then we asked the question, we said, okay, let's see what ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, and Gemini from Google would do. So what we did is we gave them our definitions of converge, diverge, and inconclusive. We gave them the manifestos. We took them methodologically through the same steps that we follow. Is it to see whether they're good or bad? I don't know. I mean, because we shouldn't assume that the human analysis was correct, because it's quite subjective. But we were interested in seeing what happens. We had 5 sort of iterations. OpenAI, that's ChatGPT. We had one version where you gave it multiple prompts, sort of taking it systematically through our process. Then a second one is just a single prompt, just saying, decide. Boom. Anthropic, we did the same thing. That's Claude. And Google, I mean, it's terrible to work with Gemini because it breaks like every 4th prompt it breaks. And it was refused initially to say anything. It sounded like elections, which, I mean, obviously it was. And it said, sorry, I can't talk about elections. And we, okay, it's fine. But when we got around it a little bit. The results were really unimpressive. What do I mean with unimpressive? So first of all, we looked at the topic matches. As I said, the humans identified at least about 45 topics. Of the topics, OpenAI's multiple, Anthropic's multiple model, and the Google single prompt model, that's a percentage. Only so Anthropic with the multiple prompts did the best compared to the humans. 38% of their topics were the same, more or less, as the topics the humans identified. So significantly less than 50%. The big problem across all the models was that they gave us much fewer topics also. The humans were much more detailed, and then even when we managed to sort of tease out more topics from the machines, the alignment was like this. And then we went a step further. We said, okay, applying our definitions of converge, diverge, and inconclusive. So asking the question, to what extent are the topics that overlap, are the across manifestos, is there a notion of convergence or divergence? OpenAI only agreed with the human 7%, only 7% of the, and it's not that way around, only 7% of the topics that OpenAI found and classified as converge or diverge were the same as what you found in the human data set. A bit more for Anthropic, 22%, much more for Anthropic, 22%, and 16% for Google when we used the single prompt. Then we said, okay, let's be self-critical. Maybe the humans made some mistakes. So let's look at the places where the human, for the topics that were the same, but where the humans and the machines disagreed. Let's see. Maybe the machines can help us to correct some of the mistakes. And indeed, the machines did. There were a couple of places where we said, yeah, okay, it's fine. Thinking about it this way, we made a mistake. So the final match of convergence and divergence matches for the highest was the highest for Anthropic, 29%. So that's after we corrected our own mistakes, which is still quite low. If we would have run this experiment without any pre-knowledge of the manifestos, it would have been a complete failure. And the results would have been really completely unreliable. Yeah, so in summary, the result closest to expert analysis at 8% topic matches. So, and then of this, altogether only 29% matched both the topic and the fact and the classification with the convergence or divergence. So, and not mind-blowing. So what does it show us? I mean, there's many things we can glean from this. I think to start with, of course, it was difficult even for the human being to compare the four documents because they were quite different. I think what it confirmed at a higher sort of level, and we'll discuss this in more detail, I think, during the Q&A part, is that, as I said, if you would have relied on the machines on their own, the results would have been unreliable. For simpler data sets, I think it would have been different. For other types of tasks, different. But for this specific task that we set ourselves, we found humans much, much more useful than the machines. It's something we know. I don't think it's something our students know. And I think seeing that the conversation is the use of AI, generative AI, LLMs in the university context, the challenge for us is bringing this message home also to our students. And I'm not sure how we do this, but looking forward to discussing that. Thanks.
Yeah. Right. Excellent. Oh, yeah. You didn't have a presentation.
No, I mean, I do, but it sucks. So.
Can I do that?
No,
Hey, Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes.
10 minutes counting down.
That's about all I use AI for. Oh, she canceled it. Great. I find Siri maddening, especially when I'm driving and I want her to play a song for me or something, and she tells me there's a network error, and then she plays it. Then Apple upgrades iOS, and then she doesn't, and then they upgrade it again, and she does. But look, I'm primarily AI or a generative AI ChatGPT user, pretty much like you people. Yes, I'm from computer science, and most of the people down my hall are, looking at machine learning and deep learning algorithms and convolutional neural networks and, this and that. And I can say all the names. I have no idea what it's about. So I come to computing from a very human-centered view. So I just wanted to actually go really low, basic level. I've been called a plumber, but like probably the issues that you guys have been talking about. So that's my view on AI is it's a tool, lets me set a timer, lets me interface with companies that don't want to pay employees to talk with me, you know, to help me settle things with insurance or my bank and stuff like that. And I, you know, I use ChatGPT kind of like a glorified Wikipedia. I agree with Willem that, and AI is like a tool. I think AI is a new calculator.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's anything special. Like even when it came out, look, I'm in IT, all IT is hype. And this thing is, it's all hype right now. AI is, it's not intelligent. It's not even artificially intelligent. It mines a bunch of information and then it regurgitates it back to us. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. More often it's not. So I just wanted to go through my experience with AI in terms of courses, ethics, but not ethics like Tanya's going to talk about probably, and research. And I may mention a couple of research projects that I'm doing that do involve AI. But let's see how far I get. So we got students here, right? How many of you have used ChatGPT to submit something?
Admit to that.
You can admit it.
We're just gonna write your name.
It's not recording audio. It's not recording. Is it recording video? No. So you could just raise your hand. You don't have to say anything. Oh, come on. Yeah. Somebody's honest, right? So I can tell when I mark stuff, and my demis can also tell when it's been written by an AI. You're supposed to be able to send it to turn it in. Turn it in has got an AI module. It's nonsense. As soon as ChatGPT came out, I was like, do it, use it. We started playing around with it. I teach a course on computer networks. We were looking at, you know, algorithms and protocols that make the internet work, right? And, one of the students, one of the first things where I realized what ChatGPT is really good for, like explain the congestion control protocol of TCP, written as a sonnet by William Shakespeare. And that was hilarious. You know, we read it and it was great. It had a lot of the keywords and everything, but was it right? No. And when I gave my A1 questions to it, if I asked a regurgitation question, which I don't like, it would get it right. But if I asked it to think, no, it can't think. It would get the answer almost right. I would ask it for a numerical answer and then ask it, you know, how do you get there? It wouldn't be able to tell me the steps. And then I would correct it and say, oh yeah, you're right, you know, and it's go on. This is this iterative prompting thing. And so I encourage my students to use it for writing papers or writing code. And they will all tell me, and I go and talk to them and, you know, one by one, they will tell, I'm like, you used AI, didn't you? And after a moment of embarrassment, they're like, yeah. And I was like, that's cool. What was your experience with it? And it's usually not, it's not good for code, but it's pretty good for fixing grammar and making things read better. And the thing is why I kept encouraging it is that I wanted people to look for it, look at it, use it, and critically analyze what was coming back in order to make it better. Like to verify what was real and what was not. So I still think it's a good tool, even if it's not great, but it keeps getting better and better. So that's my main take on it. So then it comes down to plagiarism, right? So when we do anything, in social sciences, you're writing more than we're coding. But even when we're coding, we're copying code from online. We're going to SourceForge. We're going to all these different code sites. There's very little difference between using Copilot or Find to code as going to these sites. Copying the code, bring it into a larger code base and modifying it. I don't see much difference. I see online resources as a tool. I see these generative AI things as a tool. So for plagiarism, we came up with, we thought, okay, so if it's a paper, we'll take the if it's an essay about like 1 or 2 papers, we'll feed the papers into the AI and take the description of the assignment and then take what the AI generates, put it into the Turnitin corpus with all the other student papers and see, if it pulls out. We abandoned that because we could do this for code too. We have programming code, we have tools like Moss that also help us do this. It didn't really work for us. Just the normal methods work for us. We just, when people are copying code, it's usually a group of people that are friends, and those kind of social mechanics dictate plagiarism more than the other one. So when it comes to theses, I've been examining a lot of theses this year and submitting a couple. And what's happening more and more often is that in the declaration, people will declare that they're using an AI and what they did and what the steps were that were used. The same way that you state the methods or the protocol for generating a systematic literature review, same thing for generating code, same thing for submitting a paper, same thing for submitting a thesis. And so now I'm asking my students to do that because more and more it's being accepted to be able to do this. And if I move on to research, there's a couple things I wanted to share with you. So a few months ago, I applied for a Google Academic Research Award. And there's a tick box that says, did you use AI to do it? Which isn't a penalty, it's acknowledging. So it's just like citing a source, a reference in a paper. So what I'm getting at here is there's nothing, AI is not really giving us anything new that we're not already doing. It's just amplifying what we're already doing. Here's another example. I think 12 years ago, I co-supervised a PhD. I do a lot of co-supervision. Co-supervised a PhD in pharmacy. I'm glad we have signers here because the project was working with deaf communities. I've worked with deaf communities in town for more than 20 years. We were working on a pharmacy app. I don't have it on here, but I did find a phone in my office the other day that still has the code. The deaf person comes with a prescription, gives it to the pharmacist with a phone. The pharmacist, gets the meds, takes a picture of it, taps, 3 times a day with meal before meals with water or whatever. And then that unlocks a sign language video to tell a deaf person, how to take meds. She worked with an industrial design engineer and a computer scientist, to do the coding. So it was really cool. Everybody got their degrees. We got lots of papers. So Bill writes a proposal to the Bill Gates Foundation, to get money to do it. Gets rejected, of course. Okay, 12 years later, this pharmacy PhD student calls me and says, Bill, we're going to take this thing. It was called sign support, right, for pharmacy. We're going to do it for all 12 South African languages using artificial intelligence. Can I have that old proposal? I gave her the proposal. The group brainstormed on WhatsApp. We took the old proposal. We took the WhatsApp chat of brainstorming, put it into ChatGPT, wrote a proposal. We got the funding. So it's a good tool. And that we wrote a Conversation Africa piece to tell people how we did it, right? Conversation Africa is just wait until the project's, more advanced, and then we'll print it. But I think this is the new normal. I really don't think it's any different from what we did before. It just helps us do it better. All right. So, I don't know, I think Siri, like, I got a couple minutes left, I think, but here's some other things we're thinking about for ChatGPT. Using it to mark, don't think that's a good idea. Using it to pre-screen ethics applications, we think this may be a good idea. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ethics applications that sit on rec. I don't know if anybody else here does. The number of applications are enormous. Some of you may have done ethics clearance to do your work, right? So there's so many with low risk. If AI could identify low risk by going point by point to filter, right? To scan, that might be helpful. We haven't done it yet. We've suggested to the committee. We haven't suggested committee. It was just the new people like me that are like, no, man, I don't want to do like 15, 20 of these a month. Crazy. So how can we use the AI to reduce our load? Not to make decisions, but to pre-scan low risk for us. I've heard people joking about generating reports internally for admin because we have so much admin to do. Not bad, just feed all the facts and then say, right, generate a report. I have a feeling the pharmacists that I'm working with at UWC, they're going to take that and that's what they're going to submit to Gates and the MRC. We'll see. I'm not saying that it comes out and you submit what's there. It's just like the work you're doing for coursework. If you really are using ChatGPT, and I think you should be, you're still going to read it. You're still going to edit it, and you're still going to fix it up. To me, that's critical engagement. That's graduate attributes that it's about. So I still think it's good. Now, just a couple more quick things. I've been in this building before, worked with Fernette and Heather upstairs, because last year they asked us to get involved writing a mobile app to collect data from mothers about childhood development, speech capabilities. And one of my honor students coded it up, which was great fun. And as a part of testing it out, engaging with humans, she did a few languages. I think it was Tonga, Afrikaans, and maybe Zulu, and used an AI to generate the speech. And then she did it with pre-recorded video, pre-recorded audio, the way we did with Sign Support. And overwhelmingly, the people that she tested it out with, the mothers that she tested out with, preferred the recorded audio, which I think could be expected. And so now this pharmacy project, it's about doing using AI to translate in real time Q&A between pharmacists and client where they can't communicate in the language. And from the very start, I said, no, we should be pre-recording this stuff. But the thing is, if you pre-record, this is what we found with Sign Support, you can't get into free-form conversation, right? You can give information, the deaf person can say what they want, the pharmacist can say what to do, but they can't, there's no Q&A going back and forth. And so this is meant to do it. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out. Do you have time to talk about one more project? So there's a really cool project that I'm getting involved with now, working with remote San communities. So if any of you were doing social anthropology, cultural anthropology, it'd be nice to talk to you if you're interested in tech. The idea is this called two-eyed seeing. I don't know, has anybody heard of that? Two-eyed seeing? It's it came out of Canadian tertiary, working with Native peoples there, on a project or on a program, actually a bachelor's program that was about Indigenous education, where it was looking at it with two eyes, with the mainstream education and with the local Indigenous knowledge, right? So those were the two eyes. So this is, I think this is happening everywhere, not just with Indigenous communities, but with marginalized communities everywhere. For example, in South Africa, same in Namibia, the first 3 years of school can be in mother language, right? San languages, Xhosa, Zulu, Pedi, Tswana, whatever. but after third year, it goes into, English here or Namibia, English and Afrikaans, right? Most usually by, second language speakers, right? So that's not the main issue. It's not the language, but it's also the culture. And with the community that we're working with in northeast Namibia, highest dropout rate is in 4th grade. It's not just the language. Most of it's cultural because they leave their schools where they're being taught by teachers who speak their language, who know their culture, and then they go to mainstream schools where they're the lowest of the top, right? And so the idea is, in order to record the language and the culture before it disappears, in order to instill and maintain a sense of pride in the language and culture, which these peoples do have while they're being, forced to integrate with mainstream, how can we use tech to do this? We talked with a teacher and he thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if the students could describe what they're learning about in English or Afrikaans, but do it in their native language, right? With their own cultural ways of looking at things. And so this idea has become this digital two-eyed re-narration that we can do by adding annotations to web-based media on phones so that there's multiple interpretations of concepts. In fact, we're doing it with Frenet, with a deaf school here in town with sign language. And then the idea, and we don't know what's going to come of it, will be to feed these parallel streams to an AI to help do with translation for low resource languages. And maybe get, aside from just word by word, linguistic translation, maybe get some cultural translation in there. So that's the kind of AI stuff that I'm.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
Oh, I left that there. Thank you.
So I think a lot of what has already been said kind of links well with some of the things that I want to say. So I'm going to start off being a little bit more critical in terms of where I think probably isn't such a good idea to use generative AI in the higher education context. And then we can link it to the areas where I think it is probably, it could probably be useful, but I think both Bill and Willem had interesting examples of that. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything about large language models and how they work. Generally, like those are the main ethical concerns that are generally highlighted in the literature. I'm not going to address all of them. I'm just going to speak about two. Just wanted to highlight privacy with regard to the REC. That's probably going to be a concern, the REC, screening REC application. And perhaps environmental concerns, like using ChatGPT, for example, a lot more resources than just a normal Google search. So those are concerns to take into account. But I'm mostly going to be speaking about what I think are the two main problems with incorporating generative AI into most teaching and learning contexts in the university. So not so much research. I think there's a lot that can be done in the research context. When you're kind of looking at student-facing applications, the things that I'm most concerned about are reliability, right? So the inaccuracy. So not quite a calculator, because calculators tend to get the answer right. ChatGPT et al. Don't, and we don't know when they do and when they don't. We don't easily know when they do and when they don't. And then the problems of biases that are in these systems. So I'm just going to start with biases and then talk about reliability / inaccuracies. All right, so you probably know this by now, but I'm just going to kind of go through quickly where biases, let's say, your kind of main commercial systems come from. So you know that they're trained from huge data sets that mostly come from the web. A lot of them are straight from the web. They can be of very low quality. So, you know, your Reddit commentary, even Wikipedia entries, and general social media, and other user-generated data isn't necessarily of high quality, right? So they're good to give a representation of grammatical use of language, more or less, especially English. But they're not necessarily good sources to learn about subject matter that has kind of that requires some level of expertise. And so the training data can be of low quality. Is also very much skewed towards the global north. So the majority of users of the internet are in the global north. The majority language is English. That's Mandarin Chinese. Generally, younger men tend to use the internet more than other demographics, and the worldviews of those global north netizens are generally the ones that are reflected in the training data. All right, so that's going to come out in kind of the outputs that these sources generate. Right, and so biased outputs can refer to a range of things. So on the one hand, you can have outputs that reflect pernicious stereotypes. So there have been examples in the media over the last few years of kind of pernicious stereotypes that have been outputted by various commercial models. Also just in terms of language use, like gendered associations in terms of language use, and there are many examples of those. Sexualized depictions of women, especially in generative AI that produces video and images. But there's also bias in terms of just omission, right? So there are whole worldviews, whole knowledges, systems of knowledges, whole corpora of knowledge that are not present in these systems because of the training data, right? So if the language that you speak, the world that you inhabit isn't datafied, isn't digital, and it hasn't been scraped, it's not going to appear in the output system. And so they're just not that good in underrepresented language. They're not that good in reflecting parts of the world that aren't well represented in digital form, and that hasn't been included in the training data. All right, so there are ways to try and correct for this. There are ways to try and fix it. I can talk about that in the Q&A if you want to. But even the bias corrections tend to be biased. So the bias corrections tend to take place, let's say in the context of the US, for example. They tend to focus on the kinds of biases that have created the most uproar. Now they're kind of aimed at those. They're often automated, so the bias correction mechanisms can in themselves be biased by the data in terms of which they've been created. So bias isn't an easily addressed issue, and both technically and just in terms of resources. Right, so bias is a problem. If you are going to be using it to obtain knowledge about the world, there's just knowledge that's not going to be in there. Or the knowledge that you're going to get is at least going to have a certain kind of slant, a certain bias. Perhaps even more worryingly, if you are going to be deploying a large language model in the context of teaching and learning, for me, is the problem of inaccuracies. Right? So these systems get things wrong. So globally, we've heard that these systems hallucinate, and hallucinate just means they get things wrong. Right? They make errors, and the errors are basically part of the architecture of the systems. They are part of how the systems have been built. So I'm going to go through some reasons in a little bit why I don't think that hallucinations are going to be something that's going to be fixed, at least not in terms of the systems in which they are, in which they're built now. Right. So the lack of reliability partly has to do with the technicalities, the ways in which things are built. But then I think also it has to do with the kind of view of what expertise entails that has kind of been built into these systems. And I think some of the solutions that are often offered to the higher education context, such where you have promises of personalized tutors, for example, you have promises of robot teachers in the extreme, or at least research assistants and kinds of personal teaching, I think there's often a lack of understanding of what the expertise at that level actually entails. Right. So there's kind of this idea that expertise entails, but let's say learning entails something like taking a body of knowledge and transferring it to a new person, right? So kind of a codified or written body of knowledge, and that codified or written body of knowledge is transmitted, right? And instead of having a human do it, let's have a machine do it. But that's not the only thing that teaching entails. All right, so as I said, hallucination is a big problem. There currently is no hallucination-free system. Even the newest version of OpenAI's GPT series 01, in their own system card, they set out how much it hallucinates. It hallucinates a lot, right? So it's better, it's not much better. Can't distinguish between truth and falsehood. And the problem is that these systems, in the way that they are built, there's no computational way in which they can determine what is the truth and what is a falsehood. Right? So what they are doing is they are kind of outputting likely tokens based on the model that they have built on the language that they've been trained on. And so what sounds like the likely next token to output, what sounds like the likely next word to follow the words of the prompt, isn't necessarily going to be true, right? It's going to sound like the training data. It's going to mirror the training data, but it in itself is not going to be able to determine whether or not what is in the training data, or what sounds more or less like the training data, is accurate. Right, so there are ways in which you can try and improve accuracy, which you can try and make them more factual. So you can fine-tune these systems on your own data. You can have reinforcement learning by human feedback, where you basically have humans telling the system, this kind of output is good, this kind of output is bad. Give me more of the good and less of the bad. Currently, the way in which this is generally done in your big systems is by crowd workers who don't necessarily themselves have expertise in the output that they are judging the systems on. And there are other reasons to think that even if you have better training data and better fine-tuning, that the systems still won't be able to be accurate. Sorry, I just jumped over a few steps. All right. So another technique that they're using now to try and get large language models to hallucinate less is to basically fine-tune them on contextual data. So let's say we're going to use it in a healthcare application, use data from the healthcare setting, fine-tune it on that, so train the large language model on that. Then, and you can use reinforcement learning by human feedback and by experts. So you have experts tell it, right, these kinds of answers are good, these kinds of answers are bad. And you can try and augment the output either with reference to like healthcare documents in that context, or in the example of, let's say, Gemini, you can send it to the web and say, do a search on the web, and then give an output based on the search that you've done. That sometimes improves the hallucinations, but it doesn't eliminate them. And it's resource intensive, right? Now you need the expertise and you need the additional data and you need the all of the additional infrastructure involved. And there are other reasons which we can discuss during the Q&A if you want, that limit the likelihood that this is going to be successful, that we are going to get to a point where large language models are not going to hallucinate, right? Where your system is always going to output factually correct information. All right, so that's with regard to practicity. Sorry, I set a timer and I didn't start it. So Siri cancelled yours and I forgot to start mine. But okay, so I'm just going to say a few more things about expertise, and then we can go into the discussion. Right, so there are reasons to think why large language models, and even with all of the ways that exist now to make them more accurate, why they are still going to suffer with inaccuracies. Right? And then that's going to be a problem. Obviously, if you're talking about a personalized tutor or you're talking about a research assistant, an automated research assistant. If they get things wrong, then that's problematic. But I think there are other reasons to also doubt whether or not we are close to where we can have applications based on large language models and related technologies that are going to be very useful in terms of teaching and learning. So again, I'm not talking about research that much at the moment. And that is just because of the kinds of skills that you actually need to teach and the kind of context in which we learn and the kinds of things that automated systems aren't that good at the moment, right? So generally, before you even get to the higher order stuff in the teaching and learning context, where you are imparting subject matter knowledge to your students, whoever it is, you're kind of building on a whole edifice of other kinds of knowledge that currently such systems struggle with, right? And that's just examples of common sense reasoning, right? So, this person in front of me is asking this question, why would they be asking this question? Why would they be phrasing it in that way? Why would they be struggling with this? Just a whole kind of set of common sense, kind of emotional, social knowledge that we automatically bring to our interactions with other people that isn't currently automatable. At least in instances of where such automation has been successful. So in just kind of normal human interaction, understanding the world, understanding other people, understanding specific context, before we even get to the point of which knowledge do I now impart? How do I impart it? To what level of difficulty do I go into given the person that faces me? In my experience, this has worked, that hasn't worked. There's kind of this whole edifice of external expertise, external knowledge, in the sense that it's not only subject matter expertise that comes into tutoring someone, teaching someone. And a lot of this, I think, needs to be leveraged in order to really have successful systems that emulate a lot of what experts do in this field. So that's not to say that we can't use them at all, but I think many of overly optimistic applications that are being touted are just that. They are incredibly over optimistic and I think ill-founded. So I think large language models, the systems as they exist, have no level of expertise or very limited levels of expertise, which I think makes them very ill-suited to most teaching and learning enterprises. I think you can have useful applications such as tutoring to a limited extent, first tutoring students in a specific task or in a specific topic to a very limited extent, but I think it's going to take some effort. You're not going to buy these systems off the shelf, import them just as is, and you're going to have an error-free, unbiased system that does the job that you want it to do. So it's going to take some input. It's going to be expensive in terms of the data, the human experts who are going to have to curate the system, train the system, learning people. And sometimes that might be useful and sometimes not. So I think there's questions that need to be asked about what the value would be in leveraging all of those resources in order to be able to implement these systems. So doesn't mean that they're completely useless. We've had some interesting examples. I put coding up there, but now I'm not sure if I'm supposed to put coding up there because you said they're not good at coding. Apparently, the latest.
They're good at coding like baby stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But like really complex stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So baby coding, maybe writing help, as we said, idea generation, perhaps summarization, but you can't be too comfortable with a summary because you can't be sure whether or not the summary is completely accurate and whether it's gotten kind of really at the heart of what is important in the document, searching through unstructured data. So I think before I go into that one, so I think what I didn't highlight in the slide, but I think what also comes through from what Willem and George were discussing, I think most useful use cases are going to be at the expert level, where experts use these systems. They use them to do their research. They use them to kind of do some of the grunt work. But I don't think the systems as they exist at the moment are really fit for just kind of plonking students in front of them and saying, well, here's a resource, be taught. I don't think that most students, especially kind of at undergraduate level, are even necessarily at the level of being able to critically analyze the output that they're getting. If you don't know a subject matter yet, how are you going to be able to critically determine whether or not the output that the AI is giving you is accurate, biased? It's just, you're still trying to get your head around the basic. So that use cases, I think, is where it is really important to impart factually accurate information and to impart writing skills. So that's something that I'm worried about in terms of using it for writing papers and so on. Is just actually those basic skills of being able to search through a body of documents, kind of figure out what is central to those documents, being able to put in your own work, and maybe just critically engage with that is something that is going to be lost if you're going to outsource kind of your writing to an AI system. I don't think it currently is something that should be used as a primary instructor, a primary teacher / instructor, and I don't think that large language models are going to be doing any science anytime soon. And the reason why I added that is because there is no shortage of models. Well, okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. I know of at least 2 models that have been marketed as scientists, right? We're just uploading all science done ever into the system, and it is now going to regurgitate this into new science, and real scientists are going to become obsolete, or at least human scientists are going to obsolete, and I don't think that's going to happen. That's the end of my critical take.
Thank you very much to all 3 of you. I think you'll agree, 3 very interesting, contrasting in some ways, contextually contrasting, but I think a significant convergence on a number of issues here. Right, so we are working in a relatively revamped classroom here. I don't have to worry about roaming around with the mic. I'm going to open it up to questions. Simon, I know you're begging to ask.
All right, but if I'm asked to ask a question, I will ask a question. I'm a retired member of the department, for those who don't know. And I'm recently reading a book by Harari, which is called, what is it called?
Nexus.
Nexus. And it's about the history of IT. And I just want to put to you one point he makes, and then ask each of you individually whether you agree or disagree with the point. He said we should think of AI as an agent, not a tool. And as an agent, it has agency, which means that it has an agency of being able to decide not to do things that are decided by the agent rather than by those who are claimed to be able to control and to give orders or to use the tool. And if I may, in the last presentation by Tanya, you use words such as primary teacher. You use words that it can generate ideas. This is your language. There is understanding of the context. There is not emotional knowledge. There is other kinds of knowledge. These adjectives and verbs you use seem to imply that it is an agent and has agency, rather than simply being a tool. Whereas if I may come to, I'm sorry, I don't know your names, to Bill, you were very clear in saying, we, the humans, have got something in our hands, Technology is the human uses something in their hands to be able to do something that the human or humans intend to do. So there is no agency. And if I may ask the question to the three of you on this distinction.
Is there one more question? Two more questions? Or one more question? I want to take.
No, just a comment on Prof.
Okay.
Please elaborate more on agency and the opposite of agency. Please give some light there for me.
Okay, that's a sufficiently abstract question. I'm going to throw it back to you guys.
So I'll say something just on my understanding of our interaction as humans with tools. So we think tools are external to us, but tools change us and they limit also what's possible for us, but they also to some extent determine. I mean, if I use a hammer sort of pushes me in a certain direction because I need a nail to do certain things, and then the stuff I then do as a matter of course without a hammer become more restricted because I have so the point is the relationship, in my understanding, between humans and tools is a little bit complex because the tools in that sense, I think in an indirect sense, have agency because they change us. They are agents. Whether the AIs are self-aware agents, knowing that they are influencing us, my understanding is, I cannot think that it's true. That really isn't my understanding of the AIs are built, how they're working. Is it impossible? I mean, who knows? But it's like a primary self-conscious sense of agency, I cannot imagine. My understanding is that it's not possible at this point.
In the movies, it's possible.
Yes.
And maybe it'll come, maybe it'll come one day. I see AI now more like a tool because it offers affordances of what we can do with it. Like the handle, like the door handle there. It offers the affordance of me being able to turn it so I can open and close the door, right? That's
and it
how
changes how you interact with your
and
partner.
it changed, yeah, instead of banging my head against the door. But I see it, that's how I see AI. I see AI as offering affordances to be able to do this or that, whether it does it well or not, that's also a matter of debate. The hallucinations thing are a real problem because the AI comes across as believing it's hallucinations. But see, unlike Tony here, I think that's a good thing. Like I think all of us, students included, but also all of us, we need to get things wrong in order to learn how to get things right. I mean, that's kind of my approach. So I think, yeah, I still think it's a tool. And I also still, though, I think it's a calculator. I see your point. But it's garbage in, garbage out. If you put nonsense in that calculator, you're going to get nonsense.
Right. You can have accurate documents and all of the bells and whistles of getting good data in, and you're still not going to be guaranteed that you're going to get accurate statements out.
You mean out of the AI?
Out of the-
Yeah, I think so too.
So yeah, so, I mean that does limit its usefulness.
But how do you really think? Like he's saying, do you? Because we got to find out what the author thinks.
I don't.
Do you think the AI has agency?
No, I don't. I mean, it's actually a huge topic in the philosophical literature. So firstly, does current AI technology have agency? And I think most people would say no, it doesn't. But there's a gray area in terms of AI systems, they say, as opposed to other kinds of technologies, because they are able to make decisions. They're able to make things happen that isn't necessarily directly hard coded into them by a human. So it's almost like a kind of pseudo agency. Like they can then make things happen like agents would, but they don't have any self-consciousness or make decisions as in self-conscious deliberated decisions. So you kind of have this weird situation where you have a tool that potentially causes things to happen that in the past only humans could, and things can go wrong. And now the question is, well, who do you hold responsible? But I think in the majority of cases, still the consensus is the builders of the technology are responsible. So I wouldn't agree that we should treat it as an
Age.
I saw Stephen.
Yeah, I didn't get your name, the hammer example.
We had such a good example, but I mean, I'm not trying to.
Heidegger writes about the hammer. It's a very important example. Yeah, because we use tools all the time, constantly, and we only sometimes get to know we're using these tools when they break. That's one of the arguments. Everything's working here. All the lights of ESCOM shut it down. Suddenly we're aware and things break down. And breakdown comes to our attention. Surely that's non-human agency. It's shaping exactly what's going on here. We're just having this conversation. We don't need to think about the computer systems and all the rest. So there's an agency there. So it doesn't have to always be human agency. There's a big literature on non-human agency and actor network theory, Bruno Latour, and a whole bunch of others work with this from the hammer, Heidegger's example. It's just an example to illustrate how we're constantly needing these tools in our lives, but we take them so for granted that we only notice them when they break down.
I mean, I have a question to the philosopher, if I may.
Oh, okay.
On any philosopher, but on the notion of agency, I mean, the notion of human agency. So to a large extent, we're the product of our experiences, our genetic makeup, and we're subconscious of ourselves, of course, but to a large extent, our actions can be explained by our training data. So if we talk about fundamentally the distinction between the AI's agency and our agency, I guess it boils down to self-consciousness. But if I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering about that.
It's a huge topic in the literature. It's like, what is agency and what is the difference between human agency and other kinds of agency, especially if you are, if you do kind of have a mechanistic view of humans, right? We're just complex machines. So, what makes us different from AI? Usually the distinction is then made between, well, when do you feel comfortable with attributing responsibility and what happens in the instance where you have like moral liability? Basically, when do you need to hold someone responsible for something that goes wrong in a meaningful way? And it doesn't seem to be that meaningful to say, well,
And we can self redirect in terms of the moral sort of thing. So I'm actually not even that.
And I guess from the perspective of sociology and social anthropology, the key issue then is to what extent is agency necessarily individual? The essence of what we do is to kind of reflect upon the way in which agency becomes socialized, institutionalized. And I'm interested. I haven't read this book by Harari. There's a lot of stuff on the media now about him. He seems to be kind of giving voice to a growing concern. I think this is what I'll throw out to you guys. Tanya, well, if you say to me, these things don't have agency, now I believe you. I also see that. If you say to me that computer scientists are not worried about this, my sense is there's a sizable minority of technologists, okay, that are getting the stuff so-called what do they call it, the Oppenheimer moment in computer science, right? There's a sizable number of technologists, most obvious one being Jeffrey Hinton, saying, well, it's coming, right? These things are, we're building something. And I think people really want to build something. Open AI frames its whole mission around AGI. Okay? So, at one level, we ask questions about what it means for society as a whole, but this is also, it's a kind of a challenge to the university because it also involves, a certain type of agency, corporate agency, that's doing a lot of the kind of work that traditionally used to be done in a university. A lot of these top expertise in these fields are no longer sitting in university. So I'm looking specifically to you, Bill, but I don't know, you're also so computer scientist. I mean, there's a real field.
No, I'm not a computer scientist.
You're quite dismissive, but there are a lot of people that are worried about it. Could you say, well?
Yeah, people are worried. I don't know why I'm not worried about it. I mean, am I worried about the Terminator? You know, I don't know. We gotta wait and see what comes out of it. I think of a lot of, I believe a lot of it's still hype right now. And OpenAI, I'm not really sure what's behind it, just like I wasn't really sure what was behind Google, you know, do no harm and all that. It's turned out to just be a money revenue kind of thing. I wonder right now that's all AI is. Yeah, and it's a pity because that's going to drive where it goes. You know, yeah. I think people just need to be encouraged to think about it.
Yeah.
Can I maybe say, if we can take it to the sort of the learning perspective, a question to, I think, fellow panelists and the people here. So last year I had a nice lecture at ETH Zurich, so known as the sort of best, like ranking-wise, best university in continental Europe, technologically, like, you know, everything. The moment ChatGPT, I asked them, what are you doing with ChatGPT? They said the moment this was released, they stopped all undergraduate written assignments. They said everything became tests in test room. And interesting, and they said, I'm reflecting on that. I was reminded of this thing, Bloom's taxonomy and the different levels of learning, and the notion that there is, and it's not sexy to say that there is knowledge that you need to internalize. And you don't internalize by writing assignments, you can't be, and they said we are now forcing our students back into rooms to write tests with things.
I have a lot of sympathy for that.
Sorry?
Continue.
A lot of sympathy.
I have a lot of sympathy for that. I really can't see the point of students generating essays and then us looking at generated essays.
Yeah,
I mean, we can, you could just cut out the performative part and just give them marks. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we just get the AI to mark it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And I must say, I also found that quite attractive because those people really know the technology is like, it's an easy decision, boom.
I was thinking about this too, and what I've done in third year courses in the past, and then there's a visiting lecturer from Europe. I don't think he's from that university. He only has an oral final exam. You know how we still do oral defenses for masters and PhDs? His whole semester course hinges upon one oral exam at the end. He spends a half an hour with each student. Okay, it's an honors module. But it's very attractive. I mean, up until recently, I did all my tests on paper, you know. It's only now I'm, doing more and more stuff on Sunlearn. But that was a reason to do it. But when students were demoing networking and coding projects, the demis and myself, we would go around and ask from a corpus of questions and go one by one to each group member to find out orally and then mark them on that. And that was a really good way of assessing whether people knew their stuff or not.
All right, let's see. 2 questions. Yeah, let's take the 2.
Yeah, I guess partly a question, partly statements when it comes to assessments, because I'm an undergrad student in third year, and I made the choice from the time that ChatGPT came out to never even entertain, not for fun, nothing. My friends would do it and I would watch them do it, and that was enough for me. Because I'm honestly, knowing what ChatGPT is about, I'm honestly enraged at times, knowing the climate impact. And I'm also enraged by the fact that a lot of scientists, a lot of the people developing these technologies, to not consider the ethical implications. And it's great to have like so many fields where people in retrospect come along and they pose these, it's kind of a little problematic considering we're experiencing climate change, that, now you've got all these servers and they're just like completely decimating our environments. I find it enraging that we as younger students, we're not being encouraged to maybe view AI in that way as something that's dangerous, as something that's harmful. I think if more people thought of it that way, I'm not saying I have a very strong sense of social justice, so I'm not saying that it's like a moral failing in any way. I'm just saying, as somebody who finds it infuriating, maybe instilling like a sense of like, because I think lecturers have tried to go about it like instill fear in us if you're going to get 0. For some students, that's just not deterrence enough. And maybe it's kind of like a thing where you need to come with like an ethical course, like an ethics 101 to every engineering student, and to students in humanities as well, to say, listen, this is not like an acceptable way to go about obtaining your education. You're going to come out of it without a degree if you engage with AI. And say, you're just not going to have a degree. You're going to have it on paper, but it's going to be completely empty. So yeah, I guess question statement. Sorry, student raging. Yeah.
You're not buying Bitcoin, are you?
No. I clocked it as a scam.
Yeah, I think my question is just around, so we've just, I'm a tutor for the first year sociology class, and we've just come off the back of marking their essays that they did, and quite a few reflected obviously a high percentage of AI on Twitter and things like that. But we've heard that that is not always reliable, and it does come with a little disclaimer saying you've got to review it, blah, blah, blah. And just echoing a bit of what the previous speaker said in terms of the lecturers go about it by instilling the fear of God in students and saying, if you use it, these are kind of the punishable offenses that can happen. But I think that for me, I think of it just a bit differently in terms of, is there a way that we can teach students how to use it so that firstly, we're not getting these horribly repetitive essays that aren't offering anything, or even offering an answer to the question that we're asking in terms of the essays. And then within that question as well, how do we teach students to use it responsibly, not completely, obviously, the environment is not keeping that in mind, but how do we teach them to use it responsibly as well, so that they understand you've still got to critically evaluate what you're doing, and please do use it to help you, but don't just give these horrible essays that obviously have no merit to them.
I see 3 more hands, so I want to hand it back to the speakers quickly if you want to, any of you want to comment on those.
The short answer is I have absolutely no idea. I wish we knew. Because I mean, there is a feeling I think among lecturers we should be doing it that way. So I put the fear of God into them, but I'm not sure that would that work with all students. I'm not sure. So I think I think some would maybe reconsider the way that they use it or using it, but I'm not sure that everyone will. So it's a difficult question. I actually don't know.
For me, there's also an element, so I have a social sciences humanities background. But to think a little bit about assessment. So even before ChatGPT, what did we teach students with those essays? And sometimes I think we teach them the skill of producing a lot of words in the shortest space of time. I mean, it's not a useful skill. And so I think it probably is also uncovering some of the fundamental assessment weaknesses we have in the subject areas that's about words. And we think we're doing something wonderful, we're assessing them. Will we read? What? So I think there is that pre-question in my view. It's certainly also an undergraduate error.
I can answer on her quickly. Can I answer her question quickly on the assessment? Just because for our honors students, I did try to do something like that. So I asked them to directly engage with ChatGPT and to look at the way it formulates arguments. So they could choose different types of logic, like deductive logic or inductive logic or something advanced. Most chose to test it on its deductive capabilities. So doing something basic like feeding it a logic problem like you get in any of these little logic puzzle books where you've got a specific set of information for which there's only one possible correct answer if you interpret that correctly. And ChatGPT and the other AI tools were incapable of doing that. For some very basic ones, it could get it right. For others, it would constantly give a random answer. It couldn't at all formulate that argument. And what they found was that you need to work with those problems iteratively because they cannot engage in proper argument formulation. And if you think about writing an essay, it's about building an argument step for step. It's a logical process. So it's that understanding that you need to work with it in an iterative way to build arguments. You cannot ask it to give you one great big argument in one go. And just to answer your question, most of them respond saying they're going to rethink how they use these tools from now on. It was an eye-opener for them to see how poorly it does on something which, and to think, okay, you think these computers, they are full of deductive logic. It's what a lot of, programming is based on, but they can only interpret our deductive logic that we feed to it. It doesn't do it itself. And that is an important distinction. I think there are ways, but in smaller groups, on the larger scale, it's more difficult. For my first is what I do find, for your answer, one of the things I find very difficult to grasp is the physical nature of these technologies, that it's not just this cloud in the sky. It has an environmental impact. It has an impact on real people in real fact. It has, there's a physical element to it. So I think that's also a very important point and something which I think I'm trying to instill in the students, but they actually find that very difficult to see. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time. It's going to take a while. I saw Ilse, I saw you. Maybe you go first, and then Ilse can follow.
I'm also an honours student. I was also a tutor for second years last term. My question is just about moving all of the humanities assessments in person, writing tests and stuff, and in some aspects that is valuable, being able to reiterate concepts and definitions and dates and those type of stuff. But I do think a large part of social anthropology is the only experience I have, and philosophy and psychology is being able to pen down your thoughts, being able to sit with research, condense it, chew on it, being able to write something that's logical, that makes sense, that is good grammatically. I do think that is an important skill to have once you come into honours. I mean, a big part of what we've done up until now, doing ethics, doing all of that, is just writing essays and writing arguments. And I do fear that moving everything in person, forcing people to sit right out of memory, isn't that just copying high school? And the actual skill of writing academically, of being grammatically accurate, of all of that is being lost because we're afraid of using AI. And I don't think that incorporating AI into humanities will be effective, because that's the only thing that AI is perfect with is language. And students aren't being taught to use language academically, because these essays generated by AI is brilliantly linguistically. They don't make sense, but that is something the students should have noticed. But being able to write academically is a skill that is not being taught by moving everything in person again.
And that's exactly how you can tell when it's been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I can link on to what she's just said. So our first year classes is about 1,000 students. So orals are not going to work. So be there forever and a day. And we are trying to teach students how to write and they come from a school environment where, unfortunately, it's not helping us at all. So they love to reiterate our slides to us, why we've now stopped using slides, and now they're complaining a lot. But so we've actually moved to a model where we get them in person in a computer room where we lock down.
Yeah.
They hate it. But you at least get to a point where they have a text that they have to critically reflect on, and they have 2 hours to do that. Now, obviously, the problem with that is venues, and the other problem is that students have to learn that it's okay not to write well from the word go. They somehow get extremely, I think it's this whole drive at tertiary, at secondary school, while at school, about marks. Marks are so important. And I keep on telling our students, please, you can, if you did your best, be okay with a 60 or a 55, even a 50, if you learn something from the marking, because we put a lot of effort in trying to give you comments. Because you're not supposed to do it well the first time round. Then you shouldn't have been here, because you don't have to be here. And I think that type of idea of it's okay to get a bad mark if you did your bit, if you learn from what you did wrong, and then you start to work at writing. And I think that is also a mentality that really struggling to get across to students. I mean, I know you have to pass, but if you come to class and if you at least study, you will pass. And getting a distinction doesn't mean that you've done doesn't really equal the level of learning that you have gone through. So I think that is the type of thing that we are struggling with, trying to sit with large numbers. But we are finding that that's what we're doing now. We're putting them in a computer room and say, you've got 2 hours, all 1,000 of you, and now you're right. And they type. The problem is there are some who come from backgrounds where they cannot type. So we have to accommodate that up to a point. So the first term we say, okay, you can write, go to the computer room, start typing, that you can get used to it. Now we get to a point where we say, well, it's 4th term. By now you should be able to type 600-word paragraph in 2 hours, really. So it forces them to also get the skill. I mean, that is where we are at the moment, because we want students to learn how to put together an argument. We want them to start to learn how to write and reflect critically. And I really don't want to waste my time marking an AI paragraph.
Thank you very much. I'm just glad I didn't really do all this mess. I think we do focus a lot on writing. It's a form of thinking, but one crucial aspect of thinking and then writing and academia is on reading. It's ChatGPT. Lesser people are reading textbooks or journal articles or using AI to summarize. So I was wondering, as Ilse was speaking, should we also put people in a lab, print out also the climate and the environment, trees, and people have an active reading session and maybe speak about it or write about it or type about it in a space where there's no AI, because I think also reading is something that's like going down because of AI.
Yeah, but that wasn't AI, that was YouTube. You know? Most of my students are learning how to code from YouTube.
Wow. So at least it's real and summarized when you see
I have Lennox and Stephen who want to come in. I'm going to make that the last, and I'm going to hand over to the final comments to the 3 speakers. Lennox, I saw Lennox first. Sorry, Lennox, and then Stephen.
What you said about the essay, that's a very triggering thing for me. And I'm working with Lloyd very closely. I taught these modules this term, 2nd year communication. So what did we want an essay to, boxes that we wanted to tick? And that's a very good question, because it's not the same for every module, right? It's not the same for every subject, right? It's very different, actually. So I think that's one of the biggest things. You got to go sit down, because that's one of our biggest problems is essays, take-home essays, right? You got to sit down and figure out what boxes of my learning outcomes are being ticked here. And if you assume that reading texts was one of them, so I could see whether they read the text, that's not the case anymore. Learning to write and structure a good essay is not necessarily the case anymore. They can use AI now to do big chunks of this. So now we need to think of alternative ways of assessing those different things. So the first thing is break it down into outcomes and skills that you want the students to learn. And that's what I'm really working on now. And then thinking, okay, so the essay does have value in a certain position. Now, how can we overcome the cheating fraction of the students to avoid them from just cheating and getting a good mark for that? You get what I'm saying? It's not as simple as yes or no. No. At all. And I don't think we should enforce a yes or a no at all at this stage. That would be, I think, really irresponsible as academics. Just saying, no, we should all use it. I think there's a space where it's very valuable, but there's also a space where it's risk of students not developing skills that they should be developing. This is what I think so this whole thing, same with the tutor thing. I think a tutor bot AI tutor bot that's trained like an agent for a specific task using specific reading skills. You can do that now. You can say, just use this reading when you answer this question, just this reading. Could be very useful to do donkey work that we may be now asking tutors to do. And some of them are overloaded and they don't do it that well. They maybe do it worse than what a bot would do. But other areas, no, the bot cannot do it yet. Not yet, maybe in 2 years' time. You get where I'm going with this, yeah. Okay, so that's mine. Yeah.
Okay.
Even.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. One word that I heard uttered is creativity. Not important, right?
No.
We want to machine learning. We want to be like the machine. Come on. That's the most important thing. I mean, and if you think the implications, and I'm making a big leap here. So there may be indicators of where this goes. And Donald Trump, successful in certain ways, efficient in a political machine, a failure in terms of what ethical judgment, in terms of the capacity to make an argument clearly, persuasively, but yet elevated to the most powerful position, supposedly. Hopefully not. What I'm saying is such a failure to take creativity and ethics absolutely seriously, and the humanities. The more I listen to these discussions, the more I think the humanities becomes really, really important. Because this is like, don't bother reading texts that came before us. Don't bother, just go to the archive of the machine. The machine will tell you what not to. So no scrum. I mean, I just remember as an undergraduate student walking through libraries. This sounds like, back then, kind of nostalgia. Well, overwhelmed by these library stacks and just wandering and not knowing where to go. But yeah, we want a machine to tell us where to go as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if that means doing absolutely no work, the better. So, I mean, provocative and polemical and all the rest. But I'm just saying there has to be a really serious thinking about how this ties into the world we want to create. If it's an efficiency machine, sure, go ahead. But if it's about thinking ethically with the multiple crises of inequality, climate, and we can go on, and trying to have any capacity to sort of try and live ethically in this world, then I don't think, machine learning is going to get us there. I'll stop.
We're out of time. Thank you, everybody. I want to hand back to Bo and Tanya very briefly. If you have any last minute sort of things you want to pick up, obviously don't answer everything. But anything that really you want to.
I'll say one thing that's not, at least what you said, and it's not a summary or anything. But I mean, the good news is there are things that we as human beings really want to do that the machines don't care about. Care for the ethical part, joy, the joy of learning a craft, of building better arguments. I mean, I'm a double basis, not relevant, but the machine, I mean, you can press that note on a keyboard. You can ask the machine to make music much better than I'll ever be able to do. But why do I practice? Why do we go listen to orchestras, not to CDs? Why do we? Because that's elements the machines can never replace. And I think that's maybe something we sometimes lose. Craft, art, joy, care, those things that really make us human are things that only we can do and actually only want to do.
Yeah, I still think that that these technologies are just going to amplify what people want to do. If somebody wants to cheat, they're going to use the tech to cheat. If somebody wants to learn, they're going to use the tech to learn. They're going to figure it out. And I totally get the environmental thing. Look, I'm a registered Green in America. I'm not going to vote for either of the big parties. I'm going to vote for Jill. And I totally get where you're coming from. But at the same time, if you think of anything with ethics, it's about trade-offs. So if you've got someone that's really going to use the tool, whether it's this thing or what, this thing also takes power, right? Yeah, you got to look at the trade-offs. There's always going to be trade-offs. But I really think that these things and the software that runs on them, they're not making decisions. People are still making decisions using this to make, and to. That's why I said I think the humans have the agency. I know that these are a part of it, but I still think they're just amplifying.
I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think maybe we should sometimes talk less in terms of the technology and more in terms of the people who are creating the technology. Because, there's a whole infrastructure, a whole world of people trying to grab your attention and rob you of agency, and as far as it can make them a lot of money. Yeah, so maybe that's also something to keep in mind. It's just the kind of ecosystem in which these systems are being created, and use that as an additional critical lens with which to view them. Not to say that we should all become Luddites, but what did that
All right.
Sometimes I want to as well, yeah.
All right, wrapping up then. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to our three speakers for a fantastic. Discussion was animated very interesting. Just before you go, I just want to flag the next few seminars that we have in this series next week. This is brother Via, one of our students, Ava, will be looking specifically at the humanities. And in about 3 weeks from now, we'll have a seminar on writing and reading. So we will be getting back to this question soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.